This is a fantasy based on reality. It's by this expression that Final Fantasy XV, the former versus 13, is often remembered. Usually, this phrase is used to criticize, since because of gaps in the narrative and unclear elements, Final Fantasy XV relies on suspension of disbelief just as much, if not more, than a classic fable. And yet, the idea that Final Fantasy is no longer based on reality isn't completely true. The union between magic and reality is present. Maybe it isn't always balanced, but it hasn't disappeared in the years of development and direction changes the project went through. What hit me the most about this game is its management of grey zones, where the narration makes way for interpretation and personal perspective. The distinction between good and evil, right and wrong is obviously present, but it isn't as strict as one may believe in case he played the game without much attention. This first video, dedicated to the lore of Final Fantasy XV, will set the basis for future speculation, especially for the topics of the next video, dedicated to the magic of the world of EOS. Today, here, I'd like to provide some insight about the two fundamental entities of the game story, ASTRALS and DAEMONS. They're imaginary creatures, traditional in their own way, easily associated to the above-mentioned concept of light and darkness, but which on closer inspection might not be so different from each other. I'd like to make it clear that I do not think that ASTRALS and DAEMONS are different names to call the same entity. The next video will in fact evidence the fundamental differences between them, and yet, maybe, they have more in common than one might think. We'll discuss the reason of this sometime in the future, together with the functioning of the magic of EOS and of the crystal. As is often the case with speculation, we'll have a lot of elements and evidence to analyze, but no real proof or demonstration. I ask you to be patient and follow step by step this and the next videos, so that I can show you my complete view in an exhaustive, complete, and clear way. Physical consumption. Even if in a different way, both the Scourge and the use of magic bring to a physical degradation. The Star Scourge weakens the body of the diseased, corrupting him in both his body and his behavior, up to the point of making him unrecognizable. In the same way, we see Regis getting prematurely old because of the magic walls built by his father and maintained by him to protect Insomnia. The same goes for the Kingsglaives and for the chosen Noctis. Both the prince and the warriors of the king burn when they use magic and the ring. And we all know the terrible fate Nyx and Ignis met with after drawing too much of that power. We might assume that the consumption is an exclusive responsibility of the ring, and that only this kind of battle magic damages the user. But that isn't true. We know that Luna Freya feels her strength failing day by day despite her young age, because of her mission and duty as the Oracle. The maiden dedicates herself without reserves to the healing of the diseased, and both this task and the forging of the covenants with the Six take her to the limit. It's likely that, more than the stab inflicted by Arden, it was her extreme effort in saving Noctis that killed her during the events of Altissia. So even a positive, peaceful, and natural kind of magic like that of the Oracle causes the user to suffer, and can likely cause him to die prematurely. The Messengers. The Messengers are entities of which very little is known. The original Japanese name for them is Tenshi, which means angel, but both translations, angel and messenger, can be considered accurate, since religions often give angels the function of ambassadors between God and men. The term angel is also used in the biblical Hebrew, malak, meaning envoy or messenger. In Final Fantasy XV, the messengers are the medium between humanity and the gods, who do not communicate with humans, with the rare exception of the Oracle, and delegate this duty to the messengers. In the game, we only see 3 of the 24 messengers, since the others were probably killed long ago by the demon Naglfar. We'll have the opportunity to discuss this further in the future. What matters now is the confirmed data we are given. Their bodies have a physical component, since they can suffer, feel emotions, get injured, and even die. They can also appear and disappear in a matter of instants, and travel quickly from one place to another. We know neither the extension of their power, nor how different their powers are from each other, nor their origin, if not that they are entities born after the gods, and probably created by them. In the Cosmogony, Gentiana, Umbra, and Prina are represented with feathered wings, so it's probable that the other beings of light shown in the representation of the Astral War are the remaining messengers, now disappeared. Despite their fantasy appearance, their shapes are reminiscent of already existing creatures, like humans, dogs, and snakes. I don't think it would be wrong to assume that the gods created them starting from these creatures, magically mutating them into something else. The messengers have an even more realistic look than most demons, who, as we know, are mutations of infected humans, so the theory that the 24 creatures are the result of a magical transformation caused by the 6 doesn't seem so far-fetched. Lastly, there's Gentiana, the messenger possessed by Shiva. Thanks to her looks of a woman dressed in black, the goddess can manifest herself, communicate her will to the Oracle, and help Noctis during his battles. Despite the enormous differences, we can't ignore some similarities between messengers and demons. They both feel human emotions, have a mortal nature, can materialize and dematerialize their bodies. They both are born from the mutations of pre-existing creatures, and are possessed, or can be possessed, by another entity. All of this, of course, doesn't make the angels the same as the victims of the Plasmodium, but many of their features are indeed quite similar to typical traits of the demons. The light of day. This is a very vague point, but I found enough coincidences to at least make it deserving to be mentioned. We know that the demons can't manifest themselves under direct sunlight, which would destroy their cellular structure. However, excluding the summons available during normal fights, where the divine appearance is strictly tied to a gameplay mechanic, which isn't all that useful, or frequent anyway, we actually never see the 6 nor the kings of Lucis appear in broad daylight. The rulers of yore show themselves in the material world, outside the ring dimension. In the Dawn trailer, where the sky is grey and rainy, only to disappear once the dawn comes. In the expansion Comrades, the Oracle appears during the night to talk to the protagonist Glaive. We see them lastly in the scenes of the game, where the world has been swallowed by darkness. Even the fight against them, added by the Royal Pack DLC, where we see them clearly for the first time, is set in a different dimension from the material one.
We will grant you our light, but know it will set when the sun rises, and the price for it will be your life.
In Kingsglaive, the kings specify that the power of the ring granted to Nyx would vanish at dawn. Is it just a coincidence, a fairy tale cliché, or the power couldn't actually last once the sun had risen? Ignis himself, in his DLC, temporarily obtains the power of the ring only after sunset and under a rainy sky, even in the non-canonical timeline. When he uses the ring, the sky over the Imperial capital shows a starry night. Furthermore, speaking of magical artifacts, many of the explorable Magitek ruins result active and accessible only during the night, even if this maybe depends from something else which we will discuss in the future. The obligatory summons for the plot never happen in broad daylight. Ramuh helps the protagonist during a night infiltration in an Imperial guard post. Titan appears to protect the altar of Alticia during a storm caused by Leviathan. Leviathan herself shows up to help Noctis only when Tenebra and the Fenestala Manor are already lost amongst flames, demons, and clouds of miasma. Finally, there are Ifrit, Shiva, and Bahamut, who show themselves to the player in a world engulfed with darkness. Could it be that the gods and the kings of Lucis, like the demons, are also for some reason weaker in the light of day? Is that why the six appear rarely and only for a short period of time? As I already said, it's a very inconsistent topic of discussion, but I'm convinced that it had to be mentioned for the sake of completeness. The appearance. The rulers of yore will have their space in future analysis. For now, I'll only mention their aesthetics as further food for thought about the topic of this video. Ancient members of the Lucis Caelum bloodline, the kings of Lucis are an ascended form of dead men and women, who, for various reasons, have distinguished themselves with their actions. Their royal arms wield an incredible power, especially against the demons, which, combined with that of the ring and of the crystal, can surpass even that of the gods themselves. Entities of light, opposed to the corruption of darkness and the scourge, and yet their design immediately reminded me of the alien and extremely creepy biotechnological style of Hans Rudolf Geiger. However anthropomorphic, their armors showed altered proportions, especially in the head and in the shape of the bust. Many of their helms even have multiple holes for the eyes, just like that of Gilgamesh, but these instead are all illuminated, as if the wearer was no longer a human, and the holes didn't have an ornamental purpose, but a functional one. Furthermore, the appearance of some of them seems to be inspired by other famous and hardly human creatures from the Final Fantasy saga, namely. The Fierce looks like the Aeon Yojimbo from Final Fantasy X, whilst the Rogue is clearly a callback to the demon Halicarnassus from Final Fantasy V. The other kings and queens seem to be a mix of angelic figures with long drapes and feathered wings, and demonic figures with armors covered with spikes and horns. The Astrals themselves, after all, often have long nails, protrusions similar to horns, long ears, sharp teeth, and other features that make them not that different from Melusine and Chardanuk, or from any Ronin or Hobgoblin. The design of Final Fantasy XV is maybe the most cured component in the game, and I find it impossible to think the kings and the gods were randomly designed with these hardly reassuring and almost demonic features. The manifestations. The crystal chained to the Zegnata's keep leaks a dense and bright fluid from the holes caused by the pickets, as if it were a living creature. It obviously is something else, but it's undeniable that that substance reminds the black liquid, sometimes illuminated by a purple light that leaks from a body corrupted by the scourge. There are two other elements very different from each other, but which share some aesthetic characteristics. For a start, the suspension of the crystals and the particles of light that materialize in the air when it is possible to summon divinity. That means in the presence of a strong magic concentration. Reminds me of the smutty and photophilous miasma released by the Nidus during the Years of Darkness, and present in places with a high concentration of plasmodium. Another interesting similarity can be noticed between the appearance of the mutated strain of Plasmodium malari and the chain structure, which tend to assume some particles of light from the crystal, and the mysterious bright dragonflies which can be found in the Pitios ruins. In the world of EOS there are completely unrelated elements, which are nevertheless connected by forms, repeating structures, even in completely different contexts or places. Why? Are they simply reused assets, or is there something more to it? You'll see the term structure will gain more and more importance with each video. The magic. As I already said, it's unlikely that the elements compared up until now have the same origin, considering their nature, behavior, and different consequences on the world and its life forms. If anything, it's the opposite. It could be an element they have in common, magic, to have brought things so different to resemble each other. In fact, just like the Astrals, the Messengers, the Oracle, and the members of the Lucis Caelum family, the demons, humans corrupted by the Scourge, are part of the few creatures able to use proper magic, for reasons I'll explain in the next video. The use of poison, fire, electricity, and water jets of the fauna of EOS are also described in the Bestiary, with based on reality explanations. The sole exception, practically unexplainable without straight up calling it magic, being the incredible control of ice of the Behemoth King, who is, not for nothing, the result of a sudden and very rare mutation, caused by an unknown source. The mutations. We have already discussed about the way the Star Scourge twists the appearance in the mind of the diseased, up to the point of making him unrecognizable. We've already mentioned the Behemoth King, whose transformation is probably liked to the Scourge, considering the time and place in which it takes place, as is the case with all other mutated animals which became aggressive and dangerous in comrades. On top, of course, of the demons born from the diseased or from people infected on purpose by the scientists of Niflheim. There is another case though, completely unrelated to the Plasmodium, which should make you think: the Jabberwock. According to the in-game bestiary, the Jabberwock is an actual living fossil, the result of the evolution of a small reptile which used to inhabit the surface. The majestic creature the players meet and defeat in order to obtain a royal arm remain confined, probably stuck inside the Cosmogony tower. Inside what seems to be the engine room of the building, to be precise. The considerable size of the reptile wouldn't consent it to access that level of the tower as a fully developed specimen. It also must be considered that, not being able to feed once imprisoned, its survival and mutation must have depended on the absorption of the magic technology of the ancient ruin. And why not on the swallowed royal arm itself? The crystals under its proto-wings could be a further hint of the cause of its transformation, and how the creature not only survived, but became stronger too. Even the Jabberwocks we meet in the Comrades mission are close to a royal tomb, another mysterious place in which there's surely a strong magical component. So we can't really exclude that the prolonged exposition to the ancient magic technology used in Solheim, and thus unrelated to the use and abuse of demons, can transform, mutate a living being, just like the Scourge does with humans and animals alike. The Magitek Exosuits. The armor worn by General Glorka in Kingslave is alimented by the magic technology of the Empire of Niflheim, which uses demons as its fuel. And yet, the model is clearly inspired by the original exosuits, if not even a recovered version found during an excavation mission like that of Staylift Groove, later converted in a lab. The armors obtained by Noxus and his companions and reactivated by Sid are undoubtedly Solheim magic technology, and, for obvious reasons, are not fueled by demons. That means Niflheim modified, maybe even improved on, the alimentation system of the Solheim exosuits, starting from the same equipment made available to Noctis and his friends. The fact that the two restored versions start from the same original model only further collaborates the theory that good magic and bad magic aren't so different after all. The nomenclature. In Final Fantasy XV, the Plasmodium parasites and malarial protozoan bacteria magically mutated for officially unknown reasons. Furthermore, we know that the original name of the ASTRALS, revealed during the active time report of September 2015 and used in official interviews in the first months of 2016, later only used as a suffix for Titan, was originally Archaeans. The term could be a reference to the Achaeans, the inhabitants of Achaea in ancient Greece, the children of Achaeus in the classical mythology, who Homer called the father of all Greeks. The name, though, could have another origin, much more faithful to the one initially used in Final Fantasy XV, and way more interesting. The Archaea, or Archaeobacteria, are prokaryotic bacteria, present in plankton, and considered to be one of the oldest, if not the oldest life form known to modern science. They are extremely adaptive creatures, just like the Plasmodium in Final Fantasy XV, which mutates in order to adapt, and can survive in environments which would be considered uninhabitable for any other life form, like thermal springs and extremely salty lakes. In a fantasy context, we can't exclude that their adaptability could bring them to mutate and bind with the elements of the world, like fire, water, and electricity, evolving in extremely powerful creatures. Even if it was later changed to Astrals, it will be interesting if the original name of the six was that of single-celled organisms, just like those which compose the Star Scourge. The origins. At the moment, the origin of the Star Scourge is still unclear. The responsibility of its appearance is generally attributed to Ifrit, but I believe that it might have more to do with his betrayal and the consequent deaths war and some kind of imbalance in the world. There's no evidence to demonstrate that Ifrit generated the scourge, and even the fact that Ifrit himself gets infected because of Arden centuries later leads to think that he wasn't immune to it, let alone its creator. The only localization to give any information about the origin of the scourge is the German one, in which Arden connects the arrival of the disease with that of the meteor. It wouldn't be that odd, since the body of Titan is in fact covered with black fluid when we meet him in the disk of Corthus, and this substance is completely missing in his other appearances. We could even dare to think that his incapacity of talking to Noctis, unlike the other gods, could be caused by this interference, this partial corruption of the god, who has been covered for centuries by the plasmodium of the meteor. It's a well-known fact that wandering celestial bodies often carry with them ice or other elements harvested during their space travels. So a meteor coming from space maybe summoned Ifrit during the Great War of old as a, based on reality, version of his meteor strike attack might have contained elementary alien life forms. If this wasn't proof enough, meteors are often called shooting stars, so the name Star Scourge could also refer to the origin of the disease, and not to a scourge that infects planets, romantically called stars. The surface of Eos is littered with craters, faults and canyons, but we don't know which are caused by the impact with celestial bodies and which by the terrible war fought against Ifrit. We can't exclude, though, that one of these rock formations could have been the point of impact and of contact of the Astrals with Eos. Maybe it was Angelgard itself, the surface of which is covered with formations which seem to be made out of crystal or vitrified rock, phenomenon associated to high temperatures, maybe caused by the friction with air. Even the shape of the island looks somewhat like the tail of the meteor. So Angelgard could be the island where, thousands of years ago, a celestial body which contained what would eventually become the Astrals fell, and, considering their origin, their name, tied to the sky, would make more sense. This could be the reason Angelgard is considered inviolable and sacred, connected to the gods and to the royal family. Similar situations exist in our world too. Just think of the ritual and religious value of the Black Stone of Muhammad or Tutankhamun's dagger. Then, assuming that the scourge comes from the meteor and the Astrals, the Archaeans, have a name identical to the already mentioned bacteria, is it plausible to believe that they also came to Eos, just like the scourge, from the sky thousands of years ago before the events told in Final Fantasy XV, and that, once come into contact with the world, and most importantly with the crystal, they evolved into entities with powers which could be considered divine? Could it be that, in a distant past, these primordial and incredibly adaptive beings, thanks to the incredible strength obtained by the planet, bound their essence to the natural elements and obtained the form, the image and likeness of the most evolved creatures of the planet, to establish with them some kind of mutualism? Could it be that men created the gods instead of the other way around? Could it be that Astrals and demons, creatures so apparently different, could have more in common than we thought? Could they be elementary forms with a similar origin, which came into contact with the world of Eos and managed to transform their structure and adapt up to the point of becoming what they are now, to start an eternal war for the dominion of the planet, in which humanity, at least once, has a fundamental role? As I already said before, it's a very fanciful topic, based nearly entirely on speculation. What's certain is that, regardless of their origins and similarities, gods and demons are the complete opposite of one another, but they always share something unique and special, of which I'll talk about in the next video: the magic of the world of Eos.